Hello and welcome to World Civilizations 2. We are going to study chapter 29 today, the Scientific Revolution. This is the first chapter that we are studying this semester, and I just wanted to explain some things to you and show you your book. So your book is a loose leaf book. Here's the front of it. Okay, this is part 2's, the front of part 2 only. And it is called World Civilizations 2 Since the 1500s, Volume 2, by Philip Adler and Randall L. Powells. And it is loose leaf, and you can take out pages as needed, and that is kind of the new wave of the future. So you can take a few with you instead of your whole book, if you like. It does come as one book, and then it's split up into two because it's just too many years to cover. And this is the complete book here. So that's what the whole book looks like. All right. Okay. Some of you were confused because we started chapter 29, and this book actually starts at chapter 22. And the reason for that is the first volume goes all the way to 28, and I taught that last semester. And the second volume does start at 22, but if you took my first class, we made it all the way to 29. So, sorry, 28. I don't know if that makes any sense, but you're welcome to text me and ask, and we can talk about it. So we're going to do a little bit of a split screen where you can see the PowerPoint because we have some great pictures and that sort of thing. We're going to talk about the scientific revolution and some important people in the scientific revolution. All right, so let's get to chapter 29. All right, and then we'll split the screen. Okay, here we go. All right, and let me get this a little bigger. And here we are. Okay, the scientific revolution and its enlightened aftermath. This is Isaac Newton, Sir Isaac Newton, who was born on Christmas Day and was also knighted. He is known as one of the most foremost scientific minds of the scientific revolution. Chronology, we're going to talk about Copernicus, who was very much mocked by the church for saying that the earth is not the center of the universe. He said that the sun was. And the revolution of heavenly bodies. Then we have Galileo and Francis Bacon, kind of a revolution of thought. Isaac Newton, and he wrote the Principia Mathematica and the Law of Gravitation. John Locke, the essay concerning human understanding and enlightenment flourishes. Adam Smith, Wealth of Nations. Thomas Jefferson was also considered a philosopher from the United States in writing the Declaration of Independence and talking about liberty. Scientific revolution of the 17th century. It was based on careful observation and systematic experimentation. René Descartes separated material from non-material universe, deductive reasoning, working from a general law to a particular truth or example. Francis Bacon, most ideas that explain nature have not yet been discovered. Thinkers must eliminate preconceived knowledges and proceed with persistent, careful observation of the phenomenon. Inductive reasoning, gather particular examples, and going to a general law. Later, scientists practiced empirical method, gathering data observable through the 5 senses. Then they formed a hypothesis. Background of the scientific revolution, you have to understand it's called the Dark Ages in Europe for a reason, because the church had such a hold on knowledge. And, most of these enlightened thinkers said the problem was ignorance. And like one of my favorite French philosophers says, knowledge is power, and whoever has the knowledge and won't let it get out has power. So medieval science was based more on the authority than on evidence. And a lot of people think that the scientific revolution actually meant that you could not be deeply religious with God at the same time as loving science and knowledge and truth. And that's just not true. There are still people today in the United States that actually believe that. but it isn't true, and you'll find that in instances like Galileo, Sir Isaac Newton, and that sort of thing. There were new instruments to measure things, rapid advancements in math. I really wanted to talk about who really held on and helped keep a lot of the Greek translations that were kind of lost. Were the Muslim societies really held on to knowledge and copied things into their Arabic texts. We're going to get to a slide in a moment about all the universities, and you have to understand while Europe was in the Dark Ages, China and the Islamic world were developing into powerhouses of knowledge. In fact, the first university was in 900 Common Era, or AD, and it is still continuously going today. It was founded in Cairo, Egypt, in a mosque, and it's still in business today. Whereas, that sort of knowledge was not being dispensed in Europe. Okay, so background. Progression of scientific thoughts. We talked about Copernicus, Nicholas Copernicus. Geocentrism, the Earth is the center of the universe, or heliocentrism, which would be the sun. Okay. Both Martin Luther and John Calvin mocked him for his beliefs and said that he was wrong, and he was not. Progression of scientific knowledge. Galileo is just an amazing figure, but it's very sad. He was very devout religiously, but he was placed under house arrest because of his beliefs. Very sad. Let's see. Religion and science in the 17th century. Galileo was forced to retract his theory, but more and more people were trying, more and more scientists were trying to mesh them together. You didn't have to be one or the other. There didn't have to be a polarity. You could be religious and love the truth in science just like you can today. The science of man. Traditional consider a branch of philosophy. Science was not part of its own wing. It was part of philosophy. And as people began to prove that Aristotle was not the ultimatum of truth, and questioning, which I think is always good education, to question, because the truth will pop up when you're questioning, and you'll be able to find it. Okay, emergence of the science of man, or social science, attempt to study human behavior and scientifically and discover predictable laws. So because of the scientific revolution, these great thinkers were like, hey, let's apply this revolution of seeking truth and not saying that the church can tell us what to believe and what not to believe, but let's apply that to social sciences, and that's exactly what they did. And that's when the Enlightenment came. And they thought that the social sciences could be examined just like natural sciences: optimism, rationality, secularism, kind of dividing it from the church, because when the church had control, they wouldn't let that knowledge out. You would be burned at the stake if you disagreed with their science. John Locke, Essay Concerning Human Understanding. I wanted to talk about that. Let's see. He has a great quote in here. He wrote the Essay Concerning Human Understanding, John Locke did. He was a great political mind. He said that the mind is a blank page until experience, environment write on and mold it. Thus, human nature is dynamic and unfixed. It can change. It has been in the past and will be in the future, formed by external experiences, and this experience is capable of being controlled. So humans are not condemned to repeat endlessly the sin of Adam and the mistakes of the past. They can and must take charge of their destiny, and they can perfect themselves. So you can change, you can better yourself. This idea before was actually not really thought about. 18th century reformers believed that those profited from ignorance and prejudice controlled religious belief and used it as a tool to obscure the truth. And that is where it really gets scary, because that can still happen. The philosophers, they were men and women. Many of them were French. Let's go down to that slide. Whoa. Philosophers. Writers, scientists, intellectuals. And they actually It said later on in your chapter that they were brilliant conversationalists, and they just really debated and asked questions and talked about progress rather than modernity. Um, Progress is and modernity, they seem like they're the same, but they're not. Sometimes modernity is just modern and not good. In progress, you want to move forward, bringing everyone with you. Okay, there's a lovely slide here. Oh, France, Voltaire, Diderot, Rousseau, Great Britain. It's very, we need to make sure that we pay attention to Mary Wollstonecraft. She is known as a foundational starter of feminism, believing that men and women are equal in a society that really believed that women couldn't think. And she really went against the tide and has a wonderful story. Scientific revolution in the 17th century. I want you to really notice something. I want you to notice where all the universities are popping up. Okay, because this is a great picture. Publications of scientific journals are the little black books. Then you have important universities, locations of royal academies of science. And you have to remember that the first university was in Cairo, Egypt. This center really is around Germany, and there's a good reason for this, because when Martin Luther, 500 years ago, this past October 31st, he nailed 95 Theses on the wall. It's a 500-year anniversary of the Protestant Reformation, which I know it split religion for Christianity into two segments, but it did more than that, because Martin Luther said every man, woman, and child needs to learn to read. And that's why you have this bursting of knowledge and universities. Whenever a country invests in teaching its people to read, everything goes up. Their technology, their universities, their scientific minds. It's amazing. And then you see a lot of the evidence of that in World War I because of the extreme, amazing technology that Germany actually had. Okay, let's keep going. The philosophies and their ideals, balance of government, constitutional limitation of monarchy, power, freedom of conscience. Everyone was really saying that liberty was a human right, but oftentimes monarchs took it away from the individual. Okay, mandatory education, abolish all forms or most forms of censorship. Okay, where'd we go here? Okay, here is Thomas Jefferson. I'm sorry, that's not Thomas Jefferson. That would be Benjamin Franklin. Adam Smith in the Economic Thought. He wrote The Wealth of Nations. He talked about free enterprise, free trade, laissez-faire, leave it alone, the unseen hand, natural laws of economic market. Okay, then we have educational theory and popularization of knowledge. We have Rousseau. The Encyclopedia was written in France and had 35 volumes, and this hunt and thirst for knowledge and truth was really beginning to take off. Okay, ideals of the Enlightenment: reason, liberty, and happiness. Reason, human's highest gift; liberty, personal freedoms to do, say anything not harming another; and happiness, accessible here and now; and progress, inevitable improvement. Here we have some pictures. I believe we have Voltaire on the left and Rousseau on the right. Okay. Theory and popularizing knowledge. The audience of the philosophes, urban elite, and it wasn't for the masses yet. It didn't trickle down to the masses yet for quite some time. And that was another thing that was coming on the forefront, that this individualism, that you're an individual with a voice and a choice and agency. But it was trickling down. Let's see. Philosophers often met in salons of great hostesses. Paris was a center of enlightenment, and then London was kind of a second center. No sympathy for occasional call to violence. Debated one another in pamphlets, news, papers that were read, and not everyone could read yet, though. So because they were in the Dark Ages for so long, so they really had to educate the masses before they could. Okay, and here we have a great picture of a brother and sister who are working on a discovering astronomy together. Their names were William and Caroline Herschel, and they discovered, I believe he discovered Uranus, and she discovered several comets. Okay, and